Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we're taking a look at the Detroit Red Wings as the Red Wings have had an interesting free agency. It's a very polarizing way of looking at the Red Wings. There's the positive and the negative. The best way for me to put this is a free agency period by Steve Yzerman that is basically feast or famine. And the way I say that is there's a couple of moves he made that were really, really solid, right? And then there's a couple moves that are a little bit questionable at best, and some would even say maybe one of the worst contracts given out during the free agency period so far. So we're going to discuss both sides of it and my final verdict on the Detroit Red Wings free agency for 2023. Also, before we get into that, guys, make sure to check out my last video. It was about the Red Wings and the draft. They did really well on the draft floor, maybe a little bit more up for speculation and debate in terms of what they did in free agency, but they had a really good draft period, which was the video right before this, so make sure to check that out if you're a Wings fan or not. It was a great video and did really well, so thank you guys so much. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the Red Wings free agency. So a lot of things have been going on for the Detroit Red Wings. You look at some of the guys that they've brought on here over the last couple of days. The highest cap hit was JT Compher, who comes in on a 5-year deal. He's making $5.1 million per season. That deal is going to take him till he's 33 years old. Now, this is the first one that, to be honest with you, a little bit questionable. Now, I understand the appeal here. He's from Northbrook, Illinois, right? So he's not that far from Michigan. Yes, I know it's far, but it's in the Midwest, right? And probably grew up as a Red Wings fan, which we know Steve Yzerman has been doing for a while and picking up guys that have played at the University of Michigan. I don't think that's a coincidence. He spent his entire career with the Colorado Avalanche since the 2016-17 season. And last season, I think, is a bit of an outlier, but you can't ignore the fact that he had 52 points in 82 games with the Colorado Avalanche last season. So he was a 50-point guy last year, and he got paid like a 50-point player because he's making over $5 million per season for the next 5 years. So my verdict on that is this is a guy that's going to be a great second or third line winger. Now, the good thing about Compher as well is he can also play center. Now, he's listed as a right winger, but he can also play center, which in the event that there's some injuries, whether that's to, say, an Andrew Kopp or a Robbie Fabry or even a Dylan Larkin, JT Compher can move throughout the lineup, which I think is a really nice asset here, and it's part of the reason that I think Steve Yzerman was so attracted to a guy like JT Compher coming in. Now, this is another one that I'm actually a big fan of, and that is Klim Kostin, 24-year-old. He was an Edmonton Oilers player. They were not able to fit him under the cap, and he was kind of a casualty of the salary situation in Edmonton. And Steve Yzerman, give him credit, man. He brings in a really good hockey player here. 6'3", 212 pounds, 24 years old. He was a 2017 first-round pick of the St. Louis Blues. He played with Edmonton last season and put up 20 points in 57 games. So hopefully, if he's healthy next year, we know he had some issues in the beginning of the year with a big injury. And, he did unfortunately miss a significant amount of time. So I think the expectation here is he'll be back, he'll be healthy, he'll be ready to go for next season. And I think there's a lot of excitement for what Klim Kostin can be for the Detroit Red Wings going into the fall. So moving on, another one that I'm a huge fan of here. This is one of probably the best signings by Steve Yzerman during this year's free agency class. Actually, I would even consider one of the best free agent signings, period. And that is bringing in Daniel Sprong, 26-year-old forward. He signs a 1-year deal, $2 million with the Detroit Red Wings. Now, you may be asking yourself, Kevin, why do you like this guy? What makes Daniel Sprong the guy, and maybe one of the best signings in the free agency period so far? So he's 26 years old. He is formerly a second-round pick of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Highly coveted prospect when he was drafted. This was a guy that ended up going 46th overall, was projected to be a first-round pick that year, back in 2015. and things never materialized in Pittsburgh. Things didn't work out for him. He kind of bounced around. He ended up going to Anaheim for 2 years, ended up going to the Hershey Bears, went to Washington for a little while, and then ended up in Seattle, where he has put up some really good numbers and finally seems to be finding his game at the National Hockey League level. And just to give you a perspective here, this is a guy that put up 21 goals, 25 assists for 46 points in only 66 games this past season, which is admirable to say the least. Now, here's the caveat, and this is where the naysayers will come in and say, well, is that sustainable? Because you look at the rest of his career, he has not put up a 15-goal season any other season since before this one. So, yes, is it a small sample size? Yes. But when you look at what the intangibles are for Daniel Sprong, given enough ice time in the right situation, Daniel Sprong is capable of putting up those kind of numbers. This isn't that surprising in my opinion. You know, we've seen him put up some good numbers in the AHL, but he struggled to translate that to the National Hockey League. And now it sounds like he's finally picking up the pace, finally getting to the level where this is a player that is more than capable of putting up, at the very least, 15 goals a season. I think that's a safe bet. Given he's healthy, playing a full 82-game schedule, I think a very conservative number, at least 15 goals. And if he's healthy for a full 82 games, could definitely get you over that 20-goal mark easily. I think he's that capable of scoring goals. That's what he was drafted for, and he was a highly prized prospect because of that. So I think Daniel Sprong could actually be one of the better signings by the Detroit Red Wings this offseason. Now, another guy that I've talked about forever, this is a guy that's been sitting in Arizona and, in my opinion, has been a wasted talent. That is Christian Fischer. Christian Fischer, 26 years old, same age as Daniel Sprong. He signed a one-year deal, a little over $1 million. Another guy from Illinois, along with JT Compher. He was also drafted in 2015 like Daniel Sprong, but in the second round, actually a little bit before Daniel Sprong. Similar situation, right? Was projected to be a top 6 winger that could produce at the NHL level, and it just never really worked out in Arizona. Now, the difference here is, you know, Daniel Sprong's been kind of a journeyman. Not the case for Christian Fischer. He has been with the Arizona Coyotes since the 2016-17 season, really since he's been drafted. He has not been traded. So this is his first time. This fall will be the first time we are seeing Christian Fischer in an NHL jersey other than the Arizona Coyotes, which is going to be a little bit different. But this is a guy that I think also has a lot of potential. I've been beating this guy's drum for years. Now, what you're looking at in Christian Fischer, definitely not the offensive upside of Daniel Sprong, but he brings some of that meat and potatoes side of the game. And that's where I think a guy like Christian Fischer really fits into this Red Wings lineup, because a lot of people will argue that the Red Wings offense, especially with Tyler Bertuzzi gone now, they're a fairly small team, right? So that's why you bring in a guy like Christian Fischer, who comes in at 6'2", 214 pounds, right? The combination between Christian Fischer and now Klim Kostin, now you've got some size on that forward group for the Red Wings, which is huge. That's, you know, pun intended, you know, you're adding some real size to that group, right? JT Compher comes in at 6 foot. Andrew Kopp is actually a fairly big player, 6'1", a little over 200 pounds. So, yes, you've got the skill guys, the more perimeter guys, as some would call them, right? And Dylan Larkin and David Perron and, you know, Daniel Sprong, Zadina, Berggren, Raymond, Casper. Those are a little bit more skill, speed guys, right? And then you've got that little blend of the bigger guys up front that can get in front of the net, you know, kind of get their nose dirty in front of the net and this and that. That's where those guys come in. And now that the Red Wings have moved on from guys, like I said, like Tyler Bertuzzi, like Adam Ernie, those guys leaving the organization, now you got to bring in some more tough guys. And to be honest with you, I think these tough guys are better than the guys that they had previously. So I would definitely say there's a bit of an improvement in that bottom 6 and an improvement in their depth scoring, even in the top 6. Now, we didn't even get to the defense yet. The defense saw some changes for the Red Wings, with some controversy in there as well. Shayne Gostisbehere signs a one-year deal, a little over $4 million. I'm okay with that deal. Shayne Gostisbehere is a puck-moving defenseman. He could quarterback that second power play for the Red Wings. Mo Seider is your number one, and Gostisbehere can jump on the number two power play. Totally fine with that. I think that's a great pickup for them. It's a one-year deal, low risk, high reward situation. Excuse me, guys. Now comes the other contract. This is the one not a fan of, and that is Justin Holl. So he has a modified no-trade clause, which already the alarm bells go off. The Edina, Minnesota native signs a 3-year contract with the Detroit Red Wings. Like I said, a 10-team no-trade list, a modified no-trade clause, $3.4 million per season. The reason I don't like this deal is Justin Holl was never a great defenseman in Toronto. And I hate to give him, I hate to kind of use him as the scapegoat, but he really kind of has been throughout his career in Toronto. He just never, it was always like, why are we paying this guy this much money? Because the talent, it's one of those guys that he seemingly always gets those contracts, but you're like, why? What makes this guy, worthy of that deal? And his numbers are okay, right? Like last season, he had 18 points in 60 games. He had 23 points the last 2 seasons before that. In a shortened season, you're always asking yourself with a guy with Justin Holl, what is it that makes him that type of player? And he does look good on the ice, right? There's certain aspects in his game where he's a little bit tough to play against and things like that. But to make $3.4 million per season, there's been a lot of arguments, especially on Twitter, that this might be the worst contract in the free agency class this year. And I think I agree with that. This is one that I think the fact it's a 3-year deal, and it just seems so odd to me. I don't understand why teams continue to give him money, but that's the situation. And that's definitely my most controversial one here because I'm not a fan of that deal. Now, the other one is Alex Lyon and James Reimer. I'm a fan of both these guys. James Reimer comes in, probably going to be that veteran backup to go alongside Ville Husso. I don't know how much they really trusted Husso fully. So now you bring in James Reimer, who had some mitigating numbers last year. Alex Lyon comes in. He's really the third goalie for them. In the event that there's an injury to either Husso or Reimer, he could jump in to be a backup or even start a couple of games, maybe 6 or 7 games, depending on how things work out next season. Hopefully you don't need him for more than that. But Alex Lyon was a decent goalie prospect and just never really materialized. So he's a capable goalie. He'll probably spend most of the season with GR in the AHL, and that's fine because that's just goalie depth. And that way you're not forcing a guy like Sebastian Cossa, who we expect to be playing a lot with the Grand Rapids Griffins next season. So at this point, I think the Red Wings had a pretty good offseason. Again, not perfect. I think, once you sign that many contracts like Yzerman did, once you start, basically I look at Justin Holl as the example of Ben Sherratt last year. When you look at that Ben Sherratt contract, you knew on day one, that's not going to be a good contract. I think that's similar to the Justin Holl deal this year. Yes, Yzerman made a couple of really grand slam home run deals, in my opinion, but there's also that one where you're like, ooh, I cannot sign off on that one. I cannot agree with that move, but it's Steve Yzerman. He's the GM of the Red Wings, and none of us are because he's making the calls, and chances are he's getting paid because he's probably making a better call than we give him credit. So let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think of the Red Wings offseason so far? It's been definitely interesting, to say the least, but I want to know your guys' thoughts on the free agency class, what they did at the draft, and what you think of their expectations going to next season. Because you look at this team right now, the expectations, in my opinion, they should be fighting it out for a playoff spot. Definitely a wild card spot. It's going to be tough in the Atlantic Division and the Metropolitan Division. Those are two very good conferences in the Eastern Two very good divisions in the Eastern Conference. So it's going to be tough for the Red Wings to get in. But you look at some teams like, what's Florida going to look like? Even Toronto. Boston's a big one. What's going to happen with the Bruins? If 2 teams can fall off in the Atlantic Division, that might be all it takes for a team like Detroit to get in. But then again, you have teams like Buffalo on the rise, Montreal, Ottawa. It's not going to be easy, but I think the Red Wings are definitely going to give themselves a case for next season where they want to be going to the trade deadline, kind of similar to this season, where you're at the very least asking yourself, should we go for it or not? And I think that's from there, Steve Eisman will decide what they do. But let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.